All right, guys, we have some amazing news. Unless you've been living under a rock, you've likely heard about PayPal's announcement. They are going to be offering support for Bitcoin and other digital currencies, other cryptocurrencies specifically, which is very, very encouraging. There is still a conversion mechanism that we're going to talk about. It's not really a direct crypto transfer. Nevertheless, very, very positive news. The market is swelling as a result. It's a tide that is lifting all ships. All kinds of news outlets are talking about that. We're going to be discussing these numbers. I'm going to give you my sense of optimism that comes along with this, as well as in the second half of this video, I'll give you some anecdotal examples of what I think could happen with not only other players in the market, but what I think this means for kind of people that I'm familiar with that use cryptocurrencies to a certain extent. Maybe they're lukewarm on the subjects, but how I think that this involvement here with PayPal could really push them over the edge. And I think those are the kinds of consumers that are representative of a lot of people that are kind of right on the fringe that could really enter this space with this news. Hey everybody, Matty here with Altcoin Buzz. I am definitely in a particularly good mood today. Hopefully you are as well, in light of all this news that we're seeing here. So much so that I'm actually joined by my friend Jack here in the back. He's a nice guy, a little bit quiet, but don't mind him. Guys, everybody is talking about this news, and normally Frank was talking about it earlier, how generally you have outlets such as CNN, for example, that really don't weigh in on much. Now, personally speaking, I'm not a big fan of CNN. I think it's more of an editorial website than anything else. However, this is an example of just straight up news that they're actually covering, which I think is great. And when CNN and the likes of CNN, Forbes, and others are covering cryptocurrency news, it's generally an indicator that the news is pretty significant and is a pretty big deal. And this is definitely one such example. They write, Bitcoin prices surge after PayPal jumps into the cryptocurrency business. Another example here is Business Insider. Bitcoin leaps to highest since July of 2019. It's over a year ago, after PayPal opens service to cryptocurrencies. Another example here is BBC. So again, guys, big major outlets that typically deal in either finance or politics or other things, just regular journalism, honestly, now talking about cryptocurrency. Not only that, talking about it in a very positive light. PayPal allows Bitcoin and crypto spending. And then you have perhaps the more traditional outlets like TechCrunch that would be covering it. So that's normal. We're going to get to the original Reuters reporting here in just a moment. They broke the story to the best of my knowledge. Let's take a look at the markets here. At the time I'm recording, we're just below 13K. However, we did cross that barrier previously, and Bitcoin is up. Although it's down in the last hour, it's still up pretty substantially in the last 24 hours. Now leveling off a little bit just below that 13K mark. But guys, take a look at the altcoins here. Not only did we have this impressive surge by Bitcoin, which is up over 12% in these last 7 days, you have altcoins across the board that are just being buoyed by this energy, by this enthusiasm here. Particularly Ethereum in these last 24 hours, up 6.7%. Particularly others, including Litecoin as well, which is actually now down a little bit versus what I was seeing before, but they're up 4.6% in these last 24 hours. So support for Ethereum, support for Litecoin, and others. We'll be discussing that in just a moment, but this is really the kind of news that is a rising tide that lifts all ships. So very, very positive across the board. Total market cap right now hovering just below $400 billion. We're up 4%. That's $398.6 billion with a dominance for Bitcoin that's just below 60%, 59.8%. Those are good numbers. All right, guys, so as I mentioned, just about everybody under the sun, whether they normally deal in cryptocurrency or not, they're talking about this news. Again, some of the usual suspects, such as CoinDesk, you would expect, TechCrunch, but again, the BBCs of the world, the Yahoo Finances of the world, the CNNs of the world, the Forbes and the Business Insiders of the world. They don't really have any business covering this kind of stuff, really, unless it's big and massive news, and in this case, it is. So here's a very quick and simple snapshot of why it's significant. For fiscal year 2019, this gives you a sense of the size of the company. PayPal reported earnings of $2.459 billion with an annual revenue of $17.772 billion. And you know that when you have to really specify to the third decimal place, you're dealing with a big number. So $17.772 billion, which is an increase of 15% over the previous fiscal cycle. PayPal's shares traded at over $108 per share, and its market capitalization was valued at over $127.58 billion in December of last year. And as far as the price of PayPal, taking a look at the share here, we did see a jump of somewhere in the neighborhood of about 7% in the last day or so between the 21st and the 22nd of October. Again, although we're kind of coming back down off the hype right now, we did see a jump from about the 201 range to a high of $215 per share. So not only, again, is this a buoy for the world of cryptocurrency, it seems to be a two-way street, because this news for a lot of people that perhaps see the writing on the wall, it was encouraging for them to see that PayPal is getting into this space, and therefore, albeit briefly, we did see a commensurate rise with the enthusiasm there in the stock price. I want to discuss the fact that, this isn't strictly speaking a cryptocurrency sending platform or sending mechanism that they're initiating. There is going to be a conversion. So the way it works is that you would buy a certain amount of dollars, presumably US dollars, when you sell your, let's for the sake of argument discuss Bitcoin here. PayPal would then send those US dollars, and there would be another conversion at the exit phase of the transaction. So you're not exactly sending Bitcoin to a recipient that can then accept it in their wallet. There is that conversion mechanism that kind of kicks in similarly with other platforms. But the fact that that conversion mechanism is supported at all is still a pretty good thing, and is a very good development in my opinion, because even if you're not strictly speaking using Bitcoin, there are a lot of people out there that would not otherwise have a Bitcoin wallet with which to receive those funds. But if they can now accept money from somebody that is discussing Bitcoin for the first time with them, again, for somebody that's on the fringes, that's just outside the framing here of the cryptocurrency sphere, this is something that's going to warm them up to the idea and is at least going to introduce them to the concept, if not the technology. Here's what the president and chief executive officer of PayPal, Dan Schulman, had to say, quote, "We are working with central banks and thinking of all forms of digital currencies and how PayPal can play a role." So not only will US account holders be able to buy, sell, and hold cryptocurrencies in their PayPal wallets, the company said PayPal is also planning to expand the service to its peer-to-peer payment app Venmo and some other countries in the first half of 2021. And it's possible, like they're looking already to expand it to Venmo. It's possible that they were feeling kind of the heat coming from the likes of Jack Dorsey, who's for so many months now, and if not years, he's been promoting Square, he's been promoting the Cash App, and you have these other services that are aggressively pursuing this strategy here. Not only that, you have, again, Dorsey, who is the CEO of Square on the one hand, but also the CEO of Twitter, who is very vocally advertising his support for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, calling it internet money, so to speak, this 21st century currency that we all need. He's less a supporter and perhaps more an evangelical for the cause at this point. We talked about the size of the company just a moment ago in terms of their value, but here's a sense of their active account numbers, 346 million. Let me say that again. The company has 346 million active accounts around the world, and they processed $222 billion in payments in the second quarter. So a lot of money is changing hands courtesy of PayPal. And again, on the heels of this news, their shares went up 4% at the time of this press release. But again, I think that was eclipsed slightly. By my calculations, it was closer to 6 or 7% in terms of the 24-hour swing. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, although this is still very encouraging news, payments are still going to be settled using traditional currencies such as the US dollar. So as the article explains, this means PayPal will be managing the risk of price fluctuations, and merchants will receive payments in virtual coins. They talk about this here in terms of volatility, which is not a concern, but it is a factor that you have to consider when dealing in the world of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Quote, "We are going about it in a fundamentally different way to make sure we provide the maximum amount of safety to our merchants," Schulman said. PayPal services come as some central banks have announced plans to develop digital versions of their currencies, known as central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs, following a Facebook-led FBO cryptocurrency project, Libra, in 2019, which was met by strong regulatory pushback. In my opinion, I mentioned this before, but I was under the impression that by now, by late 2020, the US would already be well underway in terms of having either a Fed coin or some kind of central bank-backed digital currency. And I think because of the congressional testimonies, because of the distrust actually that Washington had for Mark Zuckerberg and for Facebook, that's been derailed. I've talked about this in another video, and not to go off on a tangent here, but China is certainly taking the lead. They want that first mover advantage when it comes to a CBDC that can set global standards. And a very interesting observation here on the website, altcoinbuzz.io, PayPal invested reserve rights RSR token pumps over 40%. This article by Deepika. And although it's a great project in and of itself, we've talked about reserve rights in the past. You can check out our previous footage and reporting on that. PayPal's co-founder Peter Thiel is actually heavily invested in reserve rights and has direct affiliation with the project. So that association right there has been a boon for them in light of this great PayPal news. And at the time of this recording, at the time of press, it was up 40%. At the time of this recording, it's leveling off a bit, but still up 30.9% on the day to just over 1.5 pennies US. Okay, as I promised, I want to share with you guys kind of my anecdotal perspective of why I think this is pretty important news. And, unsurprisingly, I think the obvious, let's just state the obvious out of the gate, that PayPal is a major force in the world. A lot of people use PayPal. Those 300 plus million accounts are super significant. So everybody's excited for that reason, obviously. I'm a little bit more excited when I kind of extrapolate and think ahead, though. I have all kinds of friends in my circle that are kind of like lukewarm on cryptocurrencies. Maybe they kind of are interested in the idea, but they really want to see what other people are doing in this space. They don't want to be those early adopters. They don't want to be in there like the Michael Saylors of the world. They don't want to invest $400 million into their public treasuries, right, for MicroStrategy. That's an extreme example, but I think a lot of people are doing just that. They're kind of waiting by the sidelines. They're going to see what happens. Unfortunately, for them, in my opinion, it's the early adopters that ultimately soak up the majority of the gains, high risk, high reward in a sense. That's more or less the formula. But what I do see, so you have those people that are on the sidelines, on the fringes. I do see a lot of people actively using PayPal. So, my friends that may be disinterested-ish in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, they're relatively speaking still quite comfortable and quite familiar with PayPal. So for them and for a lot of people, in my circle and beyond, this is very much going to be a validation, and this is going to set a precedent that a lot of people can look back to. We've had a couple of these in the past. Don't forget, we've had Overstock.com that has accepted Bitcoin in the past, and at the time, that was kind of a big deal. We've had the Jack Dorseys and the proponents and the people in our corner that have been helping us along. Square has been a nice benefit for the cryptocurrency space, but it's not capable of single-handedly changing anything. This is kind of really a collective movement sort of thing. And once we hit that critical threshold, we're not there yet, but this is certainly moving us and pushing us in the direction. So what do I think? Ultimately, I think that for a lot of these people that are on the sidelines, this kind of acknowledgement or this validation may encourage them to, reach out to somebody that is more in the know, that is more familiar with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. Our job in turn is to welcome them, is to let them know that the water's fine, come for a swim, we'll support you, we'll help you along the way. It's not a big deal. But I think for so many people at the fringes now, this is an open invitation for them to join really ultimately the revolution. I also think that it opens the door, again, as a precedent for some of the other service payment providers out there, some of the other companies. Overstock was nice, but it's not going to move the needle one way or the other. We need some of these big players. We need the eBays, we need the Googles, we need the Apples, and perhaps the Amazons ultimately of the world. We're not there yet, but PayPal's integration, I think, is one step closer to that ultimate goal. And that's all we can really do. We can move one step at a time. We can improve 1% a day, hopefully, maybe less than that. Maybe we move or improve 0.1% at a time. But incrementally, that cumulative effect goes a long, long way. And looking back, you take those steps, you take those incremental improvements and you add them up. That really does make a difference over the course of months and years in the long run. And finally, I'm excited about where we are in terms of price right now. From just a very casual technical analysis perspective, 12,000 has been a point of resistance now for really over a couple of years. If you take a look at it, you don't even have to dissect this chart. It's very visual. It's very clear that 12,000 really since the highs of the end of 2017, early January 2018, that is what has presented us with the most trouble breaking out of the 12 to 13K range. So with this positive news, I'm not saying that we're going to burst out of it just yet. In fact, there are reasons to suggest that we are overheated. We are a little bit overbought with recent developments and recent positivity. But just the other day, we were talking about whether or not we were going to, number one, hit and number two, break through 12K. And then literally over the course of 24 hours, we went $1,000 more and broke through $13,000 because briefly we did rest up above $13,000, I believe in the 13.3, 0.2 range. So a very encouraging price move. Again, maybe a little bit too overheated, but this has really been for the last 2 years a sticking point where we've been unable to break through that range, that point of resistance with momentum and with conviction. So this is very positive news. It's not going to bring us to all-time highs on its own, but as per my analogy earlier, it's one step closer in that direction. Going above 12K is a big deal. Let's see what happens next. All right, everybody, keep checking out the website. Of course, it is altcoinbuzz.io. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about this. Let me know what company you'd like to see enter the fray next. It's going to be interesting to see how this implementation really takes effect. Again, we have to wait until next year, but hey, next year is really only a couple months away if you think about it. Again, not an exact transfer of Bitcoin, more of a conversion mechanism, but still very good overall news. Let me know your thoughts about it, guys. Stay safe out there, everybody. Best of luck if you do choose to invest, although be careful. And as always, we hope to see you again soon in our next video. Take care.